if you recognize that life is difficult, that it's in the nature of life to be difficult, then it's not difficult anymore. And so what does he mean? If you are only here as the person, it doesn't make much sense. So even if your mind tells you, I can't quite work out what it is he's talking about, of course you can't. It's not the mind that can understand it. You can only understand the essence of it by touching that in you that resonates with it. So if it feels good to sit here and listen, that means it's working. Because that means that in you that responds to it and is of the same is emerging, and that's all. It does not depend on an increased intellectual understanding of spirituality. That may come as a byproduct occasionally here and there, but that is not what gets you there. So it's not based on intellectual understanding. In a way, it's almost the opposite of that. Have the courage to go into that place, rather than thinking you need to know everything, have the courage to embrace the state of not knowing. And that's the state when you walk around the campus and you perceive without needing to have some interpretation of what it is you're perceiving. So you don't know anymore. So you have the courage to embrace, inhabit, be the state of not knowing. In the same way, when I start giving a talk, I don't know what I'm going to talk about because I'm not giving the talk. I don't need to know. It would be a terrible burden if I had to know what I'm going to talk about. And so that is a wonder. And in that state of not knowing, there is a deeper knowing that is not a conceptual knowing. There's a deeper knowing, it transcends conceptual knowing. And that is the place where wisdom, we have this beautiful word, wisdom, that is the place where wisdom arises. That is the place of wisdom, which is far deeper than intelligence. Many people are intelligent without a shred of wisdom, and it's a very dangerous condition. If humans develop and overdevelop the analytical mind and the ability of the analytical mind to do things without any wisdom, it's happening already, has happened. They create havoc. And so those who are not in touch with that, just cultivating the mind is not only dangerous for the world, it's also dangerous for the individual, because ultimately it leads you to madness. So this is a great adventure, the adventure of consciousness, awakening to itself. And what could be more enjoyable than feeling that you are part of that? You are consciousness awakening through this particular short-lived form. You are the universe awakening. It's an evolutionary, an awakening of consciousness. You're not just a little person. You are something much deeper, and it's the awakening of the universe. And as a byproduct of that, your so-called life becomes actually a more pleasant experience. That is a byproduct of awakening. It gets easier, because it doesn't mean you know stuff happening. Challenges continue to come at you. The universe is built in that way. That's how it's supposed to be. You're not supposed to have no more challenges in life. You are supposed to have many challenges, and it's through the challenges that awakening happens. After a lot of suffering, at first challenges reduce more and more the pressure of suffering and the weight of suffering, and then awakening happens. Without the challenges that the life gives you, you wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. And they are not going to stop as you awaken spiritually, but the way in which you deal with them changes. And you begin to almost welcome them when they come, because you recognize that is an inevitable part of existence on this dimension. A necessary part. And of course it's already been expressed in this classical book, The Road Less Traveled, which starts with a famous sentence, "Life is difficult." Very profound statement, true. And the next sentence is, I don't know it literally anymore, and if you recognize that life is difficult, that it's in the nature of life to be difficult, then it's not difficult anymore. And so what does he mean? I knew immediately what he meant, so I never had to read the whole book. When you recognize, I just had to read the first paragraph. Yes, he got it. When you recognize that life is difficult, meaning that challenges are inseparable from being here in this world, and then you say, and then you accept that life is difficult. Of course it's difficult, that's why it's life. So then suddenly the inner resistance when challenges come isn't there anymore. You no longer go, not another one, I can't take it anymore. Or you attack every challenge as, I'm going to make it, I'm going to fight. That's not pleasant, because you think they shouldn't be there. You regard things that happen as enemies. No, there comes a point of acceptance of, challenges come in many forms. It can be a very small challenge, like a little beetle crawling in your bed. That's very small. I had one last night. And then they grow bigger. But it's all fine. So you accept that that's in the nature of life, and then it's not that difficult anymore. It's only really difficult when you think, this should not be happening. Or you think, why is this happening to me? Why is it always me? Because everybody else seems to be okay. You look at them in the street and they all go. And they don't seem to have any problems. But if you look more closely, you realize, oh no, they have problems, lots, because they don't look that happy. They try to. In some countries they're better at hiding it. In the United States they're quite much better at saying, I'm fine. And if you go to Russia, they tell you the truth, they say, I'm not happy. Not everybody, but so enjoy this particular part of the adventure of life, the awakening, and use the opportunity so that you're not just on a retreat on the surface level, but a true retreat, an inner retreat from your usual self. You're alone, waiting for the elevator, and immediately always temptation to fill this moment up with something. Some people cannot tolerate being alone in a room and not be doing anything. Because all that thinking knows is through concepts, thoughts. From the point of view of the egoic self, it requires courage not to run away internally, so to speak, and to seek refuge again in thinking, not to run away when you touch that dimension of no thought, pure awareness. The egoic self, of course, is afraid of that. So in the moment of transition, there could be fear. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know anything anymore. And yet there is a deep knowing in that, but it's non-conceptual. You know yourself very deeply, but not through any concepts. Yet this gnosis, direct knowing. You know your being. And again, when I talk about it, I say you know your being, you know yourself. There's a duality which doesn't actually exist. It's only when we talk about it, it's there. You're constantly challenged when you go back into the world. Well, this is the world too, but your usual world. You're constantly challenged by the world. To lose yourself in stuff, in things, in objects, in thoughts. Ultimately, it all boils down to the mind. And you're being bombarded. That's the challenge. To stay present, even when you're bombarded with all kinds of extremely important things that you need to give immediate attention to. It's amazing how lost humans are, most humans, lost in their minds, which is the world. And even when they go for walks, I've seen people walking in the forest with things on their headphones. I don't know what they're listening to. Music, perhaps. Or a talk by Eckhart. But when you're out in nature, let go of that. When you find yourself alone, no matter where, the temptation immediately arises to fill that moment up with something. Whether you are alone in your room, or whether you are alone sitting somewhere, maybe you're in a cafe and sitting in a waiting room somewhere, airport, doctor's office. You're alone, waiting for the elevator, and immediately there's always temptation to fill this moment up with something. Some people cannot tolerate being alone in a room and not be doing anything. There's something missing, as they say. In the past, you had opportunities that you could pick up a newspaper, or you could turn on the radio or the television, and some people do that immediately the moment they get home. Just can't tolerate silence, or you can be completely in your mind and say, you're not even there, you just, let's do something, But nowadays you're not confined to the radio or the television. The most obvious thing that you interact with is your devices. Any moment, when you have a moment of being somewhere, almost all humans these days, they get out their phone in order to clutter their mind. Of course, sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes there is an important message. Sometimes it's good to be able to communicate with someone. But a lot of the time, it's no more than clutter, totally not just unnecessary, but extremely harmful. It takes away, continuously obscures presence, clutters your mind more than it ever was the case in the past, when it was already cluttered. And it's an addiction. So be conscious of that, so that you learn to enjoy a period of being alone without necessarily doing anything, filling this moment up with something. As the famous French philosopher said, perhaps I think it was Pascal, he said, all the troubles of humanity are due to humans' inability to sit quietly in a room. That seems at first an exaggeration, or to say all the troubles of humanity are due to a human inability to sit quietly in a room. If you don't look more deeply, it seems, well, that can't be true. But what does that mean? The inability to sit quietly in a room means to have lost touch completely with the dimension of being. And that is the cause for all the troubles of humanity. Even Pythagoras already 2,600 years ago said, the reason for all your problems and troubles is you are disconnected from yourself. Same. But even then it was already happening, but not to such an extreme degree as now. And this is not just something that, on an individual level, it's vitally important because it brings a dimension to your life that is the only place where fulfillment can be found. And true, I'm reluctant to use the word happiness because it's deeper than happiness. So it frees you from suffering on an individual level. But as far as civilization is concerned, if the bulk of the population has lost touch with that, that doesn't even have a glimpse anymore of it, now you're looking at man sitting on a chair or on the screen, the amplified version of the man sitting on the chair. And you might be aware of the totality of the room. Peripherally, you're aware of the totality of the room also. All this is part of your visual perception right now. And that's fine. So your attention, the focus of your attention is there. And now my suggestion is, as your attention is focused on your visual perception, at the same time, can you be aware of yourself? As I've said before on various occasions, this does not mean you fall below thought. You rise above thought. You fall below thought when you're halfway towards sleep. You're so tired that you can't think anymore. And to approach sleep feels quite nice. You can't remember your problems anymore. And your history. And you're moving towards sleep. And it's delicious. Sleep beckons you. But you're falling below thinking. The same happens with many kinds of drugs that temporarily can free you from we could call it the self, the mind-made self. Certain drugs can temporarily free you, but you don't rise above thought, you usually fall below thought. There are certain other types of drugs that are used in a particular setting, in a sacred setting, that certain drugs that have been used for thousands of years in religious or spiritual ceremonies. That's a different matter. I cannot say much about it because I have never experienced that kind of thing. So I don't like to talk about something that I have no direct experience of. But so-called recreational drugs that are taken just to experience moments where the ego is absent or in the background, that for some people can be especially those people who are very much burdened by their mind, the continuous torture of their mind. When they take the drug, they can get a little space of freedom and can relax for a while without the torture of their minds. And so you have a little smoke. Life is good. It's so good. And you even start laughing, perhaps. It looks as you're looked at superficially, it looks as you had suddenly become enlightened, but you haven't. But it can give you a little glimpse of what is possible when you become free of thought. But dependency on these things usually means that you begin to move below thought more and more. And that is a state, a totally different vibrational frequency, a state of diminished alertness rather than heightened alertness, whereas the state of presence is a heightened alertness, but also a relaxed alertness. There's no tension in presence. So here's a very simple little practice. I call it practice, but at some point it becomes second nature and then it's not a practice anymore. When you look at something, anything, or use other senses too, but let's for a moment talk about the visual sense. You look at something, for example, now you're looking at man sitting on a chair, or on the screen, the amplified version of the man sitting on the chair. And you might be aware of the totality of the room. Peripherally, you're aware of the totality of the room also. All this is part of your visual perception right now. And that's fine. So your attention, the focus of your attention is there. And now my suggestion is, as your attention is focused on your visual perception, at the same time, can you be aware of yourself? No. The question is, what self? I don't mean the historical self, the person, not that self, but a deeper self, the presence of you, the being of you. Can you be aware of that and at the same time still have enough awareness left to perceive everything? So then you're aware of two things. You're aware of the perception, and you're aware of yourself as the perceiving consciousness. You can sense that there is a presence, and the perception is happening in that presence. That is easier in certain situations, in some situations than in others. It's perhaps relatively easy here and now, but in your daily life, often many things are going on and they all desperately demand your attention. And then, of course, it's not easy to practice also being aware of yourself as a perceiving presence. The phone rings and this, and then somebody comes in and says, "Have you done this?" "No, not yet." No. Everything demands your attention. Your devices, they make noises. Bing, bing, something's coming in. So you're completely losing yourself in the externals. like it's continually being drained of energy, of losing it. There's a leakage. And then people then become totally uncentered. There's no point of rest in them at all. They're completely all over the place. And many people live like that every day. And unfortunately, even young people these days, children, because they interact so much with these devices, have very short attention spans. Reading book can become difficult because nothing is happening. You have to keep your attention on it. Oh, God, I can't do that. What's the next thing that I can lose myself into? A horrible thing, a huge danger for human consciousness that we are facing. It's been bad enough even without the devices that we have. But now we've invented these devices. They amplify many of the dysfunctions of the egoic self that were already there even before, but now they become amplified. Yes, the devices can also be used for more helpful purposes, for more consciousness. They're certain. You could listen to Eckhart Tolle on your device and become present, but then put it away so that you don't get dependent on it. And then you don't need anything or anybody. But so this is a wonderful practice to be used in association with sense perception. So now I'm talking about the visual, because for most humans the visual is a predominant sense perception, followed by auditory, followed by either taste or tactile sense perceptions. But you can practice with any sense perception. You can practice with taste, for example, anything that you perceive. Here's a glass of water, and as I taste the water, tastes good. Can I be aware of myself as a perceiving consciousness, without which there would be no sense perception? There must be a consciousness that makes the sense perception possible. And so that consciousness incarnates into the sense perception, so to speak. The sense perception arises created by this consciousness. You wouldn't perceive anything without the consciousness behind the sense perception. So become aware of yourself as the awareness behind the sense perception that makes the sense perception possible. And so you practice that. Auditory also, this is when you listen to any kind of sound. Natural sounds are particularly helpful, bird song or hearing the wind in the trees or the sea, the noise of water, any kind of water. And so you listen to the noise, give it attention, but not 100% of your attention. Some attention is kept back and remains on the attention itself. Attention becoming aware of itself as the attention. Because you don't need to totally be in that thing. So you practice with relatively simple things, natural things, perceived natural, so visually, tactile. There's also the sense of smell. There's a breeze. There may be a certain scent in the air of nature, whatever it may be, and then you also perceive that. You might even be able to perceive a moment with all senses engaged. It's very rare, but it's possible that you can taste, smell, touch, auditory, visual. So you're totally, all the senses are alert, but behind it is a perceiving consciousness. And that gives you, and that is a point of rest, a point of stillness. You're centered within yourself. You're rooted in being. Rooted in being. When you conceptualize, the screen of conceptualization creates a barrier between you and whatever it is that it refers to. And without the screen of conceptualization, a sense of separation begins to dissolve between what you're perceiving and you. So there comes a sense of uniting, becoming one with that which you're perceiving. When one travels, one finds that one wants information about a new place that you've never been to before. So that happens sometimes to us when we travel. Sometimes we have somebody, a guide that shows a new city or something like that. Happens occasionally. And sometimes, although it's quite interesting to learn all these facts about a new place, but if the guide continuously talks and explains, and this building was created by this architect, was built in such and such, okay, you get overburdened with conceptual knowledge, and it prevents you from experiencing the place more directly in a non-conceptual way. And this is particularly important if you go to a place that is like an ancient cathedral or something, or a temple, and you go into that, and people travel with digital guides. Sometimes you put it in your ear and it tells you what everything is. It can be highly interesting, and you learn a lot about that place, all the significance of works of art that you see. Let's say it's a cathedral. It tells you who built it, what the meaning of this is and that, and who created that painting, and so on. You get continuous commentary as you walk through that place for 30 minutes. Are you really experiencing that place, or are you experiencing only through the screen of conceptualization? Are you really there? It's no doubt the information that you're getting is very interesting, and there is a place for that kind of knowledge, but it prevents you from something more immediate and much deeper, to experience that place truly, to be there in the state of presence. And in the state of presence, you don't actually know anything in the conventional sense, but you sense and interact with and experience that place in a different way. I don't know where we were traveling a couple of years ago, and there was a forest walk that had been organized by some naturalist and a very highly knowledgeable guide. A group of 10 people or so, we were taken through this rainforest, and the guide was full of information, but gradually I just couldn't stand the continuous talking anymore. I couldn't, burdened with knowledge, and I stayed behind more and more, and finally I was like 100 yards behind the group. There were 9 people walking. I couldn't hear anything anymore, and it was wonderful. Then suddenly I found I was really in the forest then, suddenly. Before I was in my mind. The mind had become a screen through which, in a very distant way, one could still experience the forest, but I wasn't really there. Now, without the conceptualization, of course, I miss out on quite a bit of knowledge probably, but if I had kept with the group, a lot of that knowledge I probably would have forgotten anyway soon after. So I give particular importance to this way of knowing because our civilization almost completely disregards that. It is of extreme importance. One could call it a unitive way of knowing because when you conceptualize, the screen of conceptualization creates a barrier between you and whatever it is that it refers to. And without the screen of conceptualization, a sense of separation begins to dissolve between what you're perceiving and you. So there comes a sense of uniting, becoming one with that which you're perceiving. It's the end of that sense of separation which comes through excessive conceptualization. Particularly important in relating to other human beings. When you only relate through concepts, there's always that barrier. And so any kind of, you can have, obviously, we're all familiar with prejudice. Prejudice is just an example of the inability to relate to another human being because the concepts, the accumulated concepts of the mind about this person, or because of, for whatever reason, racial prejudice or social prejudice or whatever kind of prejudice you have, there's already a formulated view in your mind. The concept makes it impossible for you to relate to the other as a human being, because all you see is the concept of this. This is the nature of prejudice. All you have is a concept, and you don't see the human being. You see your concept, and so it's an unpleasant thing to do to another human being, to impose not just prejudice, but any kind of dehumanizing them through excessive conceptualization. When you do that, and you can do it to entire groups of people, you call them something, and by calling them something, you have dehumanized them, you've made them to ciphers, to concepts. For entire systems wouldn't do that when you find terrible things happening in many countries when they kill part of their population. Genocide, it's called. That was the word I was looking for. When genocide happens, what precedes genocide is you dehumanize an entire group of people by imposing certain concepts on them. For example, in communist genocides that happened within communist countries such as Russia and China during the Cultural Revolution, especially Cambodia, when during the regime of Pol Pot, 1/3 of the population were killed. What precedes that is you impose concepts such as traitors and class enemies, imperialists, whatever concept they have. So they are traitors, they are class enemies, they are exploiters. This entire group of people, immediately they're not human anymore. You have dehumanized them. And then violence can happen more easily because you're not killing a human being, you're killing this conceptualized entity. So these things are very subtle and are also part of the how the ego relates to humans. So it's very important to have a balance in one's life between the two types of the knowing and the knowledge and the knowing. Coming back to visiting a cathedral with or without a guide, ideally you would go the first time without any guide and experience it fully, and the next day, if you're still in town, you go with a guide and experience through conceptual knowledge, the same cathedral. Now you learn a lot. And on the third day, you go back again, and then you experience this in both dimensions. You have learned a lot about it, but you have also experienced it already. And when you go back for the third time, already having accumulated that knowledge, but also having experienced it already, you can bring the two together and find a balance. So you can have the spaces of interacting directly in this unitive way, and you can still know things. So that's really the way to go, is to have the balance between the two in all areas of your life, in personal interactions and so on. The humans love their pets, obviously, because you can relate to a dog or a cat more easily without the conceptual knowing. You can just look into the eyes of a dog, and the dog looks back at you, and you're not formulating any kind of concept about the dog, and you know the dog is not imposing any concept on you. The dog has no opinion about you. It may sense an energy field, but it doesn't have an opinion. It loves you, not interested in what kind of a person you are, what your character flaws, although it can sense very negative energies, it can sense that. So animals can free you temporarily from the conceptual mind. And babies can do it too. 1-year-old baby, look into their eyes. The personality hasn't arrived yet, hasn't formed yet. Oh my God, how beautiful, they say. Oh, and you know the baby has no opinion about you. And you feel liberated for a moment.